The name Shoppe was unheard of in the 13 colonies until the American Revolution. That all changed when Anthony Schoppe moved to Machias. Because of him and his descendants, the name Schoppe is still familiar around the Machias Valley region. Originally, the name was spelled Shoppe. It has since been spelled with a C and often two E's. Now it is typically spelled Schoppee. Anthony Schoppe was the first Schoppe to settle in America. It is believed that all American descendants with the name Schoppe came from him. He was born in 1761 in Hessian Castle, a Prussian province in western Germany along the Rhine River. Hessian Castle was known as Europe's most militarized state. King George of Great Britain knew that he did not have enough British troops to control the 13 colonies. He tried to hire 20,000 Russian soldiers, but it did not work out. By the fall of 1774, King George was secretly negotiating hiring German soldiers to fight in America if needed. By the following spring, the war had begun. 6 territories in Germany agreed to rent their soldiers to King George. At the end of the Second Continental Congress, the 13 colonies came together to petition King George III. There were no opposing votes, and the Declaration of Independence was drafted and ready to sign on July 4th, 1776. One of the best-known statements within the Declaration is, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." German troops landed in Canada and America in February of 1776. They were not actually mercenaries, but auxiliary soldiers who were paid to fight for their prince's army in their homeland or abroad. Hessians were a part of the German soldiers who fought in the army of their prince. Germany was not a unified nation for almost 100 years after the American Revolution. In the late 18th century, Germany was made up of about 300 smaller principalities or states. Princes ruled over some of the smaller principalities, and they often rented out their soldiers to supplement their income. They did not rent out their entire army, but only a portion, which typically consisted of 200 to 300 new soldiers and about 400 to 600 well-trained soldiers. Some of these territories rented out 1,200 troops, while others rented as many as 20,000 troops to help stop the rebellion in America. We know that Anthony Schoppe was in America by 1777 because he was captured by the Americans in August of 1777. The Hessian soldiers were made up of single men who were physically and mentally fit and at least 5'4" tall. Typically, they were single men without children. These rules were relaxed as the war lagged on because it was more and more difficult to hire soldiers. Most of the men could not speak English and knew very little about America or the Revolution. The language barrier was very difficult when fighting alongside their British soldiers. German Major Baumeister wrote that it was twice the work to fight an incomprehensible friend and a rebellious enemy Many of the Hessian soldiers were impressed with how well American farmers lived and how much land they could own. It became appealing to them that they could own land and farm it as they pleased. They wrote home about the apple orchards, the chestnut trees, large fields of grain, and the endless forest that were so abundant. Hessians were well-trained soldiers with experience in several European conflicts. The German troops were paid by their prince, but they did not receive extra pay when Great Britain hired them to fight in the American Revolution. German troops were known to be ferocious fighters. They were very disciplined and feared by their opponents. They quickly learned that the Americans were determined and not easily discouraged or defeated. The British were clean-shaven except for a mustache, and were amazed that the unshaven men in mismatched rags could fight so well. Germans quickly learned that the Americans could shoot well and used the trees and forest to ambush their enemy. When George Washington crossed the Delaware on December 26, 1776, he was headed to Trenton, New Jersey to capture a Hessian outpost near the Delaware River. Troops from Hesse fought with Howe during the Philadelphia campaign, and troops from Brunswick, Germany, fought with Burgoyne at Saratoga. Many of Burgoyne's German troops were defeated, and they ended up joining the American forces. Anthony Shoppe was captured in the Battle of Bennington, Vermont in August of 1777, and then shipped to Boston. The Battle of Bennington was fought 10 miles northwest of Bennington, Vermont, in a town named Walloomsic, New York. The battle formed part of the Saratoga campaign, which occurred a couple of months later when General John Burgoyne was defeated by American forces. Some people feel that Schoppe was actually captured in October at Saratoga. We've not been able to prove this. He may have fought at Saratoga, but it was likely that he was fighting on the American side by that time. Anthony Schoppe was one of those who joined the American forces. He enlisted in the American forces within a month or so of being captured. By the end of 1777, he was fighting alongside the men that he had been hired to fight. He appears on a list of the American military pensioners on December 31st, 1782, where he is listed as serving in Captain Maynard's company, 7th Massachusetts Regiment, age 24. He later resided at Chandler's River, which is now Jonesboro, Maine. Almost 50% of the German troops did not return home after the war. Some were killed in the war, but many chose to stay here in a country built on liberty and freedom. The Germans were not typically seafaring people. Many wrote in their journals that crossing the ocean was terrifying. It is likely that many chose not to repeat the trip back across the ocean. It is worth pointing out that several of the German troops used this exploration to America to study vegetation, trees, and North American wildlife. Some also collected items from the American Indians who fought alongside them and the British. These soldiers sent letters and unique items of interest back to Germany. Some even wrote educational books on their American discoveries. Anthony Schoppe married Phoebe on November 21, 1784. Phoebe was the daughter of Deacon Moses Spear of Quincy, Massachusetts, and soon after they were married, they moved to Down East. Moses Spear served in the Revolutionary War as a first lieutenant in Captain Seth Turner's company of Colonel Benjamin Lincoln's regiment. It is believed that Anthony Shoppe also served in Lincoln's regiment. After the war, Anthony and Phoebe moved to what is now known as Roke Island in Jonesport, Maine. They brought one child named William with them. Roke Island has also been known as Gardner Island. That first winter, they lived in a camp on the backside of Roke Island. They then moved to the mainland, where they acquired about 200 acres of land on Shoppe Point. They also owned the nearby 40-acre island known as Schoppe Island. Judah Chandler settled Chandler River in 1764 and built a mill upriver where the town of Jonesboro is now located. The land was conveyed by Massachusetts to John B. Jones in March of 1788. The land Jones acquired included portions of Jonesport, Machias, and Machias Port. The lower part of Jonesboro, where Shoppe lived, became known as Englishman's River, and later it became known as the town of Roke's Bluff. The land Anthony lived on was centered between Chandler River and Englishman's River. He built a house on Shoppe Point. Anthony and Phoebe had 11 more children on Shoppe Point. 3 of the boys, named William, John, and Francis, married 3 sisters named Althea, Elsie, and Frances, who were the daughters of Josiah and Hannah Weston, who was famous for her all-night march through the woods to carry ammunition for the 1775 Battle of Machias, where the British ship named the Margaretta was captured. Anthony died here in Roke Bluffs on October 12, 1816, at the age of 55. Phoebe later died September 10, 1839, at the age of 63. Originally, they were buried by their homes, but were later moved to a nearby resting place at the Roke Bluff Cemetery, where other descendants are buried. It is likely that Anthony was in Roke Bluffs when Benedict Arnold bought a house on a barge that now rests overlooking Englishman's River. Ephraim Schoppe built a house near Shoppe Point in 1820. This house was built very near where Anthony had built his house. It is believed that the present barn is likely built over the site of Anthony's original house. Today, the Roke Bluff State Park circles the land that was once owned by Anthony and Phoebe Schoppe.
You know how long it's been since I've done this?
Climb aboard, my little patriot. Show off my bald patriot. you what, they dug like this. I don't envy it. Not one bit.